Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to the Oxford Energy Network seminar. My name's Tina Forsyth. I'm the network convener. Before introducing today's speaker, I just want to mention a couple of upcoming events. As you can see, we've got a slide up here telling you about them. To go on in too much detail. Next week, same time, same place, we've got the final seminar of this academic year, which is called Aviation, Energy and Climate Perspectives from an Expert Panel. So we've got one economist, somebody from Oxford Net Zero, and the University Sustainability Officer, who's an expert on travel within the university. So there should be a really nice debate, followed by drinks and nibbles to celebrate it's the end of term. So please come if you can. Another event I wanted to mention was our colleague Jan Rosenau is giving a talk next week on the 18th, how social media turned my work into policy influence. Jan's got something like 150,000 followers across various social media things, which is quite a lot for an energy policy expert, avoiding the word nerd. So, I mean, that would be really interesting. It's going to be online as well as real life. And the final thing to mention is Oxford Energy Lab. So that's us and the Zero Institute are running the final one of this academic year, Friday the 20th of June, 12 to 2 p.m. in the East Lab. So in this building, again, everybody's very welcome. We're going to have very, very brief updates from me and Paul, and then we're going to have a sort of open mic session where you can either share a bit of research you've done, share an event that you're excited about, whatever it is. So it's going to be a way to exchange information as well as have a free lunch. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say about the network. So now moving on to today's speaker. So you'll have seen the title, interested in battery energy storage systems, and in fact, all sorts of use of AI and machine learning around green energy infrastructure. So our speaker, Peter, he started off with a doctorate of physics at this university, which is very impressive. And then he's had a very successful private sector career, building a lot of high growth ventures. He was CEO of an electrochemistry spin out from Imperial College London called Ceres Power, correctly, which took public on the London Stock Exchange, ultimately attaining a more than $1 billion unicorn valuation. Then he's worked with Octopus Investments as an entrepreneur in residence, and he's now CEO of a new software company called Spine. Going to be explaining about what the work of that is. So obviously had a really interesting, very dynamic career, and really delighted to have him here today to speak to us about his thoughts. Things, energy, data, AI.
Thank you very much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to the next hour or so. Hopefully the first bit may feel a bit like a monologue, but then hopefully a dialogue. So let's kind of rev it up in the Q&A section. So as my cheesy title sort of is meant to imply, there's an app for that, borrowed from internet speak all over the world, is that's genuinely true for infrastructure assets in the energy sector, like giant batteries filling football fields, right? It used to be all about just, copper, steel, concrete, and dollar bills or pound notes, but actually data and data-driven software solutions are absolutely essential to making these infrastructure assets work and work well. I should have asked the basic question about clicking forward, shouldn't I? Is this the clicker?
Yes, please.
Perfect. I could probably figure that out. Point it this direction?
That way.
That way.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it.
It's unpredictable.
Why is it unpredictable?
Sometimes if you click the mouse onto the screen, and then it sort of finds the app.
Okay, well, we can do it by brute force anyway. It'll be fine. So a bit of scene setting, and I don't think this will be news to anybody, hopefully, but I think it's definitely worth a refresh. So if you're the lens for this seminar for me, because this is partly the business world I understand in most depth, so I can really share hopefully some genuine insights, is the world of those businesses, those actors that own, operate, fund the assets themselves. There's a world of other actors in the industry, but I'm really looking through the lens of those that fund, own, and operate these assets. So some people call them next generation IPPs, independent power producers, but basically call them whatever you want. They're the ones that own and operate these assets. And for them to really win in this global energy transformation underway, they really need to harness the power of digital innovations. Otherwise, you can get slaughtered in the market. The difference between smart and dumb is being killed, actually, and it's that severe in returns on capital employed. So the first bit, I think, is no news to anybody, is that we are electrifying the world, and we're electrifying the world with now green electrons. This is awesome, right? It's not just because it's green, but it's actually now unequivocally the cheapest form in the world is renewable generation, whether that's solar or wind, and the curves. The curve around hydro is like this, the curve around wind is like this, the curve around solar is almost vertical, the curve around batteries is even steeper, right? So the reason why I'm focusing on batteries today, it's becoming a truly investable infrastructure asset class, not least because it's the glue that holds renewable powered grids together, whether it's physically balancing grid networks or financially balancing markets, and in fact, both. The inherent flexibility from batteries makes them like the perfect option model, right? It's like it can do nothing, it can go up, it can go down, depending what's necessary. So that's the second big theme is the economists predicted it's going to be the next $1 trillion industry in the world of green energy. They said it must be true, right? But yeah, this bringing together of physics and economics in a single asset class, which is flexible enough to provide services to do stuff in the physical network as well as in the financial markets, is really powerful and necessary in a renewables powered world. And the associated complexity to do with batteries, they're complicated electrochemically, they're complicated mechanically, they're complicated operationally, they're definitely complicated financially. Creates both the necessity but also the opportunity to hit it with a digital sledgehammer, right? And now we got the tools to do it. So yeah, it's super complicated, physics and economics crashing together, but we can now cope with it because the digital infrastructure that AWS and other cloud innovators built globally around the world is now able to be used at sensible cost. The barriers to entry are lower. The data-driven machine learning algorithms and AI is again coming fast and furiously, and a lot of it has nothing to do with the LLMs. It's more to do within the guts of very domain-specific streams of data. So when you combine what digital infrastructure for the internet and really domain-specific sector relevant machine learning and AI models can do for you, it makes these highly flexible asset classes truly investable. And you can see it just beginning around the world, becoming bankable, become reliable. People are even talking about the combination of batteries and renewables becoming, the new base load. I think that's a terrible expression, but firm green power is maybe a better expression. But yeah, that combination of data-driven renewables infrastructure is becoming, reliable and bankable. So having said all that wonderful stuff, so let's bring it back to reality for a sec, right? Because the picture on the left is still basically how the world largely works today, which is not that long ago, you'd raise a relatively small amount of money, maybe $100 million or pounds or euros, whatever your currency is. And you would then buy a bunch of batteries to be procured and built by equipment vendors or EPC contractors, linked to the physical hardware. During the commissioning and post-commissioning into operations, you'd probably outsource the ongoing operations and maintenance and repair to another giant outsourced company. And you'd also outsource the monetization, turning hardware into money, to another giant external vendor, a route to market provider, an optimizer, a trader, a utility company, someone like that. So you'd basically be flying blind, hence the blindfold on, right? So you'd raise a relatively small amount of money, you'd be largely passive, not active, and you really wouldn't be in control of your own business because you've outsourced to equipment vendors, to service providers, and to traders. And you collect money and you hope it's the right number. And you hope it's giving you a decent return on capital. Fast forward to today and certainly into the future, you end up in a world where actually you shift from quite passive fund managers to very active asset managers. They're on top of things every second and minute and hour of the day. They know what's happening. They insist on owning their own commercial and operational strategy, not just hoping for the best with outsourced vendors. And And now they're managing bags of money which are 10 times or 100 times bigger than they were only a few years ago. So the numbers justify tooling up to kind of get on top of that complexity. Whereas before, maybe reasonably, if you're not managing much, just outsource it and just be largely passive. It's efficient to have 3 or 4 people doing not very much if your supply chain is doing a reasonable-ish job. But if the stakes are ginormous and the difference between a good return and a terrible return is understanding the data every second of the day, then you want to be on top of things. And that's when, enter technology, basically. And that's the theme for today. So very small vignette on what I do as a day job, the business that I founded and I'm now growing with a team and some financial backers is a software solution, which is like a 3-layer cake, if you want to think of it in bakery terms, right? There are interfaces from our software system to financial markets, so market connectors. So meant to be all sort of conceptually software modules, all chopped up in little pieces, all working interoperably but autonomous. Whether those markets are, wholesale markets, balancing, ancillaries with system operators, whatever. And suddenly asset connectors to the physical world of kit, whether those are the grid scale batteries or increasingly batteries are going to be co-located with renewables, whether physically on the same grid connections or financially managed as part of mixed asset portfolios. You're going to need to talk to the physical world, right? When people say there's an app for that, it isn't just, hey, cool thing on your phone and suddenly the world works perfectly. You do need to actually be able to communicate with and control and monitor what these big industrial pieces of equipment are actually doing to monitor them. The next layer up is around data ingestion, data processing, data hosting, data cleansing. Again, supporting a range of business logic, a bunch of applications, an increasingly broad range of apps, whether in sort of medium green, it's applications that us as a startup write ourselves, which we're doing, or in light green, applications that the end customer is writing themselves in an environment that we provide, and they can write their own private applications, their own secret sauce just for them. Or in the darker green, that's meant to imply applications that are being written by a whole bunch of super cool software nerdy specialists, proliferating around the world, battery health analytics providers, forecast providers, trading algo providers, you name it. There's an app being built for these physical and financial use cases from a wide variety of third parties. So basically what we've engineered is a 3-layer cake that talks to markets and assets, an energy data platform in the middle, hosting applications that we write, customers write, and third-party companies integrate with. And really that's kind of, and it really puts the asset owner operator directly in charge of their world. Instead of just flying blind and outsourcing everything to somebody else, they then have a complete tech solution to do it themselves. So I just thought I'd kind of pick the most trivial example, but then unpack the complexity where data and machine learning and different software applications really shine a light on how you can create surprising amount of value or mitigate key risks in a day in the life of an asset owner operator. So for example, the beating heart of the operations of one of these giant, fleets of assets in quite a small team is asset management operations measured on millisecond timescales, second timescales, minutes, hours, now into days, but I'm just thinking mainly the kind of the milliseconds up to the next day, let's say. And in general, you've got different ways of making money on those different timescales. Frequency, obviously, and ancillaries, that's wobbling around in milliseconds. You've got balancing and other things in trading in kind of half-hour chunks or whatever chunks you want into kind of days. And you're going to, all those things, boil down sometimes to as simple as a question of to cycle or not to cycle. That is the question, right? Terrible pun on Shakespeare. And that question, let's say you've got an opportunity to make a trade at a certain amount, I can trade, 500 megawatt hours of power with my site at this price. Do I do it? Do I not do it? Simple question, right? Obviously, the answer is either yes or no. Just do it. Well, it's dependent on all sorts of stuff, right? So what's the value of making that decision? How much would it be worth? What's my status? Am I able to do it or not? Right? If I am able to do it, is it worth doing it? What does it cost me? to execute that kind of trade to make that kind of money? Do I have any constraints that I need to be cognizant of that mean that even if I want to and it makes good money, actually I hit some sort of boundaries which mean I can't, or I'm somehow limited? And then finally, and this is really practically important, and I'll shed a light on how even this landscape of who the key decision makers are is changing dramatically in this sector. Who actually makes the decision? Even if all the ducks line up, all the ducks are in a row, yeah, go for it, good money, reasonable risks, good enough cost, within my boundaries, go for it. Well, who gives that green light? How does it all actually work? So I just thought I'd unpack a really simple question around to cycle or not to cycle through these 5 different lenses. And I've got a simple slide on each one, which I'll just go through reasonably rapid fire. So first is show me the money, right? That's what drives a lot of these decisions is it's value driven. So the key question is what is the likely value? Sometimes you don't need to know exactly how much money you're going to make in a certain trade, but what's the revenue potential now or the revenue potential in the future? You got to remember, right? If you make a decision in half an hour to discharge, well, you're clearly deciding to empty something. So if you need it, because maybe the price is even better the other way, in an hour's time, you're on the wrong side of that. So you need to think about the value in the short term, but also slightly into the future as well, because this thing is a two-way bet. If you make a one-way bet on a certain value, then the other bet goes away. So you have to think about your revenue potential now and into the future. And that relies and can be informed by a bunch of different data streams and a bunch of different applications, which are all now being built around the world. Some by companies like us, some by other specialists outside. So the kind of data and software applications you need to inform that simple question is how much money is in them our hills is, so for example, what contracts have already entered into? It's possible that the way that asset manager entered into contracts potentially weeks or months ago means that some of the value you think is there, well, actually you can't touch it because you've already committed your asset to do something else. So your contracted position, again, has been recorded somewhere, and you need to be able to tap into that data to make an informed view of what the value could be. Ideally, you've got streams of real-time pricing, auction results, all that kind of thing, streaming into your software system from the right place. You've also got a range of different forecasting models and different forward time slices. And then you've got both between value pool optimization algorithms, hunting for where the most money is, as well as within one value pool, hunting what the best way of making money from that one value pool is. And other software, data containers and data streams, as well as software algorithms. So the first key question is, is it worth it? Can I get rich doing this action to cycle or not to cycle? Is informed by quite a range of different data streams and different software applications, a lot of them being built on machine learning algorithms, especially in things like forecasting models and optimization algorithms. The next thing is, what's my actual status? I can kind of see where the money could be, but what's the status of my asset itself, the environment in which that asset is operating, the capabilities, the actual capabilities, not the assumed capabilities of the asset, again, quite often very different. So what is my actual status? Again, not assumed. Well, if you look on there, on the right-hand side, the same sort of pictorial around what data streams are relevant and what software applications are relevant to inform what the actual status is. It's kind of stuff that you'd obviously look at, what's my state of charge? Is the battery 80% full or 20% full? Well, sometimes that's more complicated than you think. To get an accurate state of charge, their entire businesses, 6 or 7 have been founded around the world the last few years. They're trying to unpick accurate state of charge estimation, which is super complicated. And if you get it wrong, the way you manage a multi-module, multi-rack battery system can be throttled. You can be losing or leaving serious money on the table. So believe it or not, accurate state of charge estimation is a big thing, which is being hammered with really increasingly sophisticated machine learning algorithms. You also want to know your environment, the external ambient temperatures, internal site level, system level, rack level temperatures all over the place. So every hierarchical, layer you can imagine, you want to know about temperatures, because we'll come on to it in a sec. Temperatures go to the heart of how you operate it, how the warranty is managed, how the bank lends you money or not. So temperature is really critical, right? So that's an environmental thing, both within and without. So internal and external data streams on temperature. So if you look at any asset manager, they're swimming in temperature data, or they should be if they're doing their job well. Then you've got, what's my actual capability? That thing I bought, that brand new 50 megawatt system that's sitting in the field there, actually, can I deliver 50 megawatts? When's the last time that I went from 0 to 100 and figured out how much is in that container, or what is it going full chat? Well, what's my state of health? Again, there's another whole range of machine learning algorithms being applied to figuring out, to inferring from day-to-day charge and discharge activity. Can you get an accurate number of if that brand new thing that was 50 megawatts when you bought it is now actually 46.3 megawatts? So there's no point in pretending you can place a 50 megawatt trade, because the best you can possibly muster is 46, right? So that's another set of data-driven machine learning predictions that you need to be on top of as the months and years go by. So you have a continuously updated state of health number in your system to understand what your trading strategy financially should be. You mustn't be trading on a false premise, and that can be horribly wrong if you're not careful. And doing an offline full test is expensive. Availability management. This is a shockingly simple but also fiendishly difficult thing to do well. And a lot of people assume, well, it's either available or it's not available. It's tripped offline, big zero, or it's online and ready to make tons of money. Well, there are tons of shades of gray. If you look at some of these batteries that fill an entire football field with containers, each one of those containers has 10,000 little batteries in it. The complexity of some sub-bit being slightly unavailable, or maybe something to do with the battery, maybe something to do with the inverter or some other on-site systems. The number of failure modes that can mean your system is partially available is hideously complicated. One of our customers, that's the number one thing that their whole asset management team cares about, is availability management. Surprise, surprise, that's what we built, a software application. That little module, all it does is look at availability, analyze any unavailability, find root cause analysis, find trending on unavailabilities, whether that's to do with which OEM you bought the kit from, or how it was being run, or what part of the country it's sitting in. Trying to figure out what causes unavailability is a big, big deal, et cetera, dot, dot, dot. So the second thing around your status, what your actual status is critical to understand, even if in that first thing is there's lots of money, let's go for it. Well, can you go for it? Your status is key. The next thing is, if you know there's tons of money to be made and your status means you can do it, well, how much will it cost you? Obviously, basic math, if costs are greater than revenues, don't do it. If costs are less than revenues, go for it. But what kind of costs, right? Are we talking costs as in sort of losses in the system? Are we talking costs as in, operating costs, or maybe CapEx costs? So really, to understand the cost picture properly from an asset manager, you need to look at, basic stuff like round trip efficiency losses and stuff inherent to the system, but that's not the key consideration most of the time. Most of the time is to understand, to cycle or not to cycle, what does that do to your asset health? What does it do to your asset longevity? So you have, again, a whole community of companies in the world tooling up increasingly powerful AI solutions around predicting what do certain fast or slow, deep or shallow cycles do to things like asset lifetime, asset degradation. Remaining useful life is an acronym, by the way. So there's an entire community of software products just designed around degradation management, degradation prediction, remaining useful life prediction, not least because the remaining useful life also informs where you might want to raise another 100 million to either replace or augment or expand your system. And playing with that lifetime consciously is something that you need to do in the full knowledge of how much money you can raise and at what price. So the full life cycle management is something that will also be informed by your degradation remaining useful life predictions, not just the cost of a single cycle. But back to state of health, understanding is whether that cycle you're about to do is going to, cost more than it's going to give you in terms of its net asset value. A lot of these fund managers keep their fleet of batteries on their books at a certain value, and that value goes up and down depending on how you're thrashing it, how its inherent value. So understanding whether a particular strategy is going to more negatively impact your net asset value compared to the overall income it's going to generate. This is basically short-term money versus long-term value. You know, is that trade-off worth it? In particular, like I alluded to, because most of these big fund managers are constantly looking to raise more money, build more assets. If you look at the rate of solar being deployed around the world, and hence the rate of batteries being deployed around the world, a given asset manager is constantly thinking about, I've got some operating assets. I'm going to raise money to build new ones. The existing ones on the ground, maybe I want to augment them and double their size. Maybe I want to replace them a bit early if I've got cheap money, or if I can buy cheap product, or the thing is wearing out. Maybe I'll wear it out better earlier because I've got the money to deploy. Let's wear it out faster. Oh, I don't have extra money to deploy. Let's eke out more lifetime. So your strategy around what it's going to cost to cycle it is also informed by your refinancing and your augmentation strategy as an asset manager. If you're not bearing in mind how much money you do or don't have and when exactly you want to deploy it, you're going to make the wrong decision about whether to cycle it, because the cost of your money is a key consideration, not just the cost impact on the asset. Cost of capital, weighted average cost of capital is a key consideration in these decisions. The next one is kind of constraints. Sorry, go ahead.
That's a quick question. On the terms of the value of the battery, obviously that depends on its profit over the next 10, 15 years of its life, which in turn depends on the price of electricity over the next 10, 15 years. In your view, how accurately can people actually forecast electricity prices and revenue 15 years into the future?
I mean, not very would be my generous, answer to that. I mean, loads of consultancies and different product companies and utilities have their own forward price curves on, ancillaries revenues, wholesale revenues, all sorts of things, right? I mean, they're all crystal balls, right? How foggy is your crystal ball is a giant guess. I mean, they're believe it or not, some of them are considered bankable enough to go and raise money on the back of, but that doesn't mean they're right. So you have to have your own judgments internally as an asset manager saying, I've got, whether it's my own curves or curves from the consultancies you all know and love, but you still need to make assumption-driven decisions on what impact that, shortening or lengthening of your lifespan has on your total income under the curve, right? And if you think, hey, the cost of products that I can buy is getting cheaper, maybe I want to wear them out a bit quicker and buy them before, or maybe the opposite equation. So you need to simultaneously consider those long-term, multi-year price predictions together with the cost and availability of your own money and equipment to buy. So it's all those things need to come together to inform what looks like an hour-by-hour decision. It needs to be, constrained by those other factors. But do I believe that, the perfection of those long-term price curves? No, but they're considered to be bankable enough to go raise finance on the back. Okay, so the constraints within which you're going to make that to cycle or not to cycle decision are partly contractual, partly financial, and some of them are sort of quasi-regulatory, I guess. So to be really concrete about some of them, this is where data is really being used in a big way, including by my company. The lonely, boring warranty. You buy a toaster at home and it breaks within 2 weeks, and you look up, did it bother filling out the warranty card? Yes, so the QR code, get the money back from whoever. Well, if you buy $100 million battery, you really care about your warranty on this thing, right? Because if it's a dud, you want to claim from the manufacturer. But the fine print in a warranty document, and I'm nerdy enough to have read many of these warranty documents, they're detailed because the way you manage the asset through its life may or may not invalidate your warranty. So when the time comes to say, hey, this thing wore out or broke or didn't work the way you said it was going to be when I bought it from you, I want my money back, please. Well, prove to me that you didn't do X, Y, or Z. You didn't have more than these thermal excursions. You didn't cycle it more than X. Show me that your driving history when you drove your car the last 5 years, you didn't drive it like a boy racer. You drove it nice and gently, like the warranty stipulated. Thank you very much. So warranty management as a software product, as a software app, is hugely important, partly so you can claim for the manufacturers if you need to. That's in the primary use case, right? But actually, the debt terms and conditions. You know, when you raise all that big bag of money to go and build your project, some of it is equity, some of it is debt. In other words, you borrow money to get a cheaper cost of capital overall to get these projects financed. And the bank is also going to say, I'm willing to give you this money as long as A, you can keep making your loan repayments to me. That's based on some sort of minimum level of revenue, fine. But also to make sure the whole asset just doesn't wear out, a bit like a mortgage on your house, right? The bank's going to ask you, you know, what's your income? Can you cover the loan repayments? But also, is your house going to fall down? Is it going to wear out? You know, so that's a second big stipulation for those banks. Is they're stipulating quite meticulously links to warranty terms and conditions. You know, operating terms like temperature excursions and number of cycles, all that same stuff. Now, interestingly, in the last couple of years, the constraints around the loans are increasingly flexible. So if you've got the data being processed in your battery to demonstrate to the bank, I consciously took a year off its asset lifetime, which was in breach of your conditions. If I pay back a year of my loan early to maintain my buffer, are we all good? And they're going to say, yep, we're all good. So flexible loan repayments based on dynamic usage of asset lifetimes is now a thing that the lending industry is getting comfortable with. So some of these terms are sacrosanct, but some of them are negotiable as long as you got the data to show how you're managing these assets. So one of the constraints around debt financing looks like it's, you know, cast in stone, because if the bank's not happy, you're done as a business. But actually, quite often, these have flexible payment terms within them, as long as you've got the data-driven evidence to show you've been doing. Then there are things like route to market contracts, if you happen to have outsourced to an optimizer, grid constraints like how you are or aren't allowed to use your grid connection, maximum import, maximum export limits, maybe at different times of day, different locations, all that kind of stuff. So the kind of constraints within which you operate, whether it's within manufacturer's warranties, the debt small print from the bank, you know, the local grid operator, or your route to market, all those constraints really do inform to cycle or not to cycle. Lastly, you know, every big decision, this may not sound like a very big decision, what do I do in the next half an hour? But in general, these decisions are happening all the time. It's important to know who's making them, right? And what data-driven software packages are using to make those decisions. So the most fundamental, coming back to my little cartoon of, do you basically just outsource your entire business to somebody else, or are you actually in control of your own destiny, is, are these key decisions being made by external vendors, right? My operations and maintenance companies deciding when is a sensible time to take the asset offline to repair it or do some maintenance, or am I making that decision? Do I trade it? Do I cycle it? Is that decision being made by a route to market provider, a utility company, or an optimizer I've outsourced to? Or am I basically trading my own assets? And by the way, are those decisions being made in the engine room or in the boardroom? So the CFO, when they signed up the big bank loan with those really annoying small print terms around how you might manage temperature excursions or cycles, should they be in charge of deciding how you take a flyer and burn through your warranty budget a bit quicker because you say, hey, the day ahead price is going nuts, let's cycle it like crazy, or not? Well, engine room versus boardroom kind of authorization limits need to be enshrined in the code to be efficient in your decision making. Otherwise, everything just grinds down to paralysis within your organizations, right? If you look on the kind of data and the kind of software app side of who does the decision and how does the decision ultimately get made, it relies on a bunch of things that now software can do. So to start with, highly configurable, situation-specific, upfront kind of config. So this asset, I bought it from X. Okay, OEM was Y. It's sitting in this part of the country. The debt versus equity split was Y. Here, the small print from this 100-page warranty document. I've used some scraping tool to extract the small print on thermal and cycling details of how I can manage my warranty risks. So all those considerations should inform a bunch of configurations that then the operating system is executing all those decisions within. So that situation-specific config, typically each site, each contract, each penny you've spent has its own particular circumstances, which need to be set up in some sort of front-end configuration thing, whether it's a human putting it in or it's a machine scraping other legal documents, putting those numbers in. Those numbers need to end up in there somehow. Otherwise, these decisions are bullshit. You're also reliant on real-time data. So like the fast and furious nature of managing things like batteries require millisecond, second, minute, hour kind of based decisions. So there's no point looking in the rearview mirror and figuring out what you should have done a month ago. It's just too late, right? Or by the time you hit a temperature limit and the light has gone red and you need to stop, that's too late. You need to be able to see if something is trending towards the wrong kind of temperature zone or the wrong kind of cycling regime well before you're there. So you can make it maybe a different trading decision. So real-time data streams together with the right forecasting models lets you operate intelligently ahead of hitting these kind of go, no go thresholds. Your applications, your apps also need to work in isolations. Your warranty manager needs to work as a warranty manager, but your warranty manager also needs to work with your availability manager and your debt manager. You know, these apps need to be interoperable. Otherwise, they're just going to be making smart isolated decisions, but together the decision is done, right? So interoperability of your software applications is vital as well. Internal APIs, et cetera, et cetera. Ideally, there's some sort of common digital backbone. Hence, you know, when I founded the company, I called it Spine. It's got nothing to do with the vertebra in your back, but it is to do with having a common digital backbone, which is secure and structurally sound and can support other functionality, but like the spine in your body does. And this combination of automation with human oversight. So generally speaking, I think what modern AI-driven software tools to manage batteries are aiming for is most of the day-to-day, hour-by-hour, minute-by-minute drudgery is being soaked up by the machine, but the human oversight is absolutely critical to intervene, to spot something that's slightly unusual, to take a judgment based on, I don't know, perceived career risk with their boss. There are so many human factors that are important around how these things get done, but you should look to kind of keep pushing sensibly, increasing levels of automation, which you can definitely do with the kind of right access to the right real-time data streams and the right kind of historical config. So do you make your decision externally, internally, in the engineering, in the boardroom? If you can get that kind of decision-making framework, again, codified in your software, then you can let the system run. So a tiny vignette on the 2 or 3 minutes that we've got before maybe we just go for a Q&A. I was very generously introduced at the beginning. I just wanted to mention that the software company to do the kind of stuff I just talked about that I founded is now up and running. We've got a small team. We've raised £500,000 from a London-based specialist seed fund called Zinc, as well as one high net worth individual, a hedge fund guy in the city, and they bring a whole bunch of really relevant skills. And we're focusing on a bunch of really value-driven use cases, like the ones we just talked about, and turning all these things into code, but not building everything ourselves because the customer might want to build it and own it. There might be a third-party software partner in the ecosystem that's already done it, and they've got some cool analytics or a great algo or a great forecast. We can plug theirs in and offer it to the customer. So we're trying to make all those sensible make-buy decisions all along that digital backbone to give the customer what they need. A very cheesy personal photo, if you're interested in the kind of person I am. Believe it or not, that's me without my glasses. That's actually when I skied to the South Pole a couple of years ago. I do not recommend it. It was very hard, deeply unpleasant, but actually, a great achievement to have done it. But I honestly wouldn't recommend it. But as far as my background, I've raised seed funding all the way through to market listings in the stock markets. I've got great industry contracts, so I can kind of put the right pieces together to make this kind of business model work. And so the product vision I took you through, so that's my baby. And we've got a great team focusing on the infrastructure layer, the software, the data handling, the infrastructure, the information security, the cyber, as well as a team focusing on the applications, these AI-driven apps, either the ones we build ourselves, the tooling that we bring out our customers to build those AI applications, and then the ones that we plug in from specialist analytics and forecasting and algo players in the outside world, all hosted on the same digital backbone. That's kind of us as a team. So the small advertorial is if you want to get in touch or follow up, info@spineplatform.com, that will reach us, or you can visit our very nascent landing page website. But anyway, thank you very much for your time.